Hey everybody, it's Kendra, aka Kaylee Capri, and tonight I'm going to be speaking on a topic, Don't Awaken Love Until the Time is Right, and that's Songs of Solomon 8 and 4. Um, yeah, so tonight I'm going to be coming out of the books of Ruth and then Ephesians chapter 5, 21 through 27. And basically, so tonight the way I'm going to do it is Ruth is going to serve as our example of a godly relationship, while Ephesians is the instruction for a godly household in the New Testament. And the two really parallel as I read them, like they really interconnected for me. And so I'm just going to show you guys how they connect and then how we can then apply the same things to our lives. So in the book of Ruth, we find Naomi and Ruth back in Bethlehem. They have just returned from Moab, which is Ruth's hometown. And now they're in Naomi's hometown of Bethlehem. And Ruth tells Naomi that she's going to go and, try to pick the remainings after the harvesters have picked in the fields. And so, as she does this, unknowingly, she winds up in Boaz's field. And while she's in Boaz's field, Boaz returns and realizes, there's an extra woman there, and he inquires about who she is. And he's informed that she's the young Moabite woman who's come back with Naomi from Moab. So, he tells Ruth after that, it's okay for you to glean with my women or whatever, and, you can pick the harvest with them or whatever, like that. And he also just, tells the young men, don't harm her or harass her, like, leave her alone. And he tells her if she's thirsty, you're more than welcome to go get the water that's prepared for my harvesters or whatever. And he basically treats her as one of his own, and he takes care of her and protects her while she's working for him. So after a while, she goes home, and Naomi tells her, it's time for me to find you a home. And so she tells her, tonight Boaz will be winnowing, and once he leaves the threshing floor, pay attention to where he falls asleep. And I want you to go get washed and put on your finest perfume, and then go lay at his feet. And she said, and when he recognizes you, he will um, tell you what to do after that. So she does as instructed, and in the middle of the night, Boaz wakes up and realizes that Ruth is at his feet. And, he tells her, you know what, you have been nothing but, a noble woman, and everyone in the community knows you are a virtuous woman. So tomorrow I'm going to go and find another relative that is closer to you than I am. And if he is willing to take you on, then, he will redeem you. But if he doesn't redeem you, as surely as the Lord lives, I will redeem you myself. So the following day, that's exactly what happens. He goes and he finds the relative that is more closely related to Ruth and Naomi. And he tells them, Naomi is trying to sell the land of her husband and her two sons. Would you be interested in redeeming the land? And the cousin initially says yes. And then he says, well, the land also comes with Ruth, the widower. And then the cousin decides not to take the land or Ruth. And so that left Boaz open to marry her or redeem her and redeem the land. And so that's what happens. Boaz goes on and he marries Ruth, and then they have a child. And, this is really good because this allows her to continue on the family name, or whatever like that. So back in those times, I'm just going to give you a little reason to why she has to marry a cousin. So back in those days, when you were married to a man, if he were to pass away, you would marry his brother, But in this case, his brother was already dead, and Naomi was no longer at childbearing age where she could bear a son that would be eligible or old enough to marry Ruth. So that's why she had to marry a cousin or the next to kin. Okay, so now I'm going to tie together Ruth and Ephesians for you guys. So in Ephesians 5:21, it says, "Submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. Wives, submit to your husbands as to the Lord. A husband is the head of his wife, as Christ is the head of the church. As the church submits to Christ, so you wives should submit to your husbands in everything." And so we have in the book of Ruth, um, Ruth is really like obedient and submissive and like has this really meek and humble spirit, and I really like that about her. So we see her, she's willing to like travel out of her own land and live with her mother-in-law and like care for her. And then she's not too proud to go and like, get the leftovers from the harvesters. But where we really see her submitting is when Naomi instructs her to go lay at the feet of Boaz in his sleep, where she's willing to just do whatever she's told, and she goes and she humbles herself and she is submitting herself to him because Naomi tells her that he is the redeemer of their family, which means he would be the one to redeem the land and to redeem her. And so she goes and she lays at his feet. And the thing I like about her is when she was out in the field, she didn't like try to be seen and all that kind of stuff. She wasn't going hard trying to be like, look, here I am, you see me. Like, she went and she was really humble, meek, and quiet. And she just went and she just, was like going and she was working hard, whatever. And the amazing thing is that God made her stand out to her later redeemer, even though she wasn't even trying to be saw. She, God, gave her favor and allowed Boaz to see her in the midst of all those harvesters, in the midst of all his harvesters and all those women that were working for him. She still stood out to him, and that was like amazing to me because it was like, you know, even when you're not trying to be seen, when you're doing something and serving the way you are supposed to, God will really open you up and make ways for you and make you noticeable even when you're not trying to be. And then to the men, I would just say this, even though the Bible instructs women to be submissive, that's because, the men have a greater responsibility of leading the family. And so you can't have a wife, you can't lead a family if your wife isn't being submissive and following you, because the children will be like, well, I ain't got to listen to you if mommy not listening to you, or whatever the case may be. So men, you have the responsibility of leading the family and showing us the godly way and keeping everybody in the family on track and making sure we are provided for and taken care of. And we will see that later on. Well, we'll see that later on. So in Ephesians 5:25, it says, "Husbands, love your wives just as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her, to make her holy, cleansing her by washing with water through the word, and to present her to himself as a glorious church, without spot or wrinkle or any other blemish, but holy and blameless." So here we see Boaz doing this by not just trying to mate with her or do anything with her. When he found her at his feet, he didn't try to sleep with her or, do anything that was not honorable. He went to the necessary parties. He went to the cousin who was next to kin in receiving Ruth in the land. And he also got the elders of the community to witness them make the exchange and transfer of land and of Ruth as a wife. So, ladies, like, that's what's really important. Like, we need a man who is going to go through the proper channels, and first, before he even decides to marry us, look how Boaz, when she was in the field, he took care of her. He made sure that there was enough for her to glean and take home to take to her mother-in-law. He also made her comfortable to go eat and drink with him and his servants at the end of the day. And he also protected her by making sure that the younger men in the field wouldn't harass her or harm her. And that's really important in picking a mate. You want a man who is going to show you prior to, without any expectation of anything. Most guys, if they're providing or giving you a little bit of something, they're not even really making sure you're taken care of. They might take you on a date or something and then expect something in return. And he was really caring for her and providing for her and protecting her without any expectation of one day becoming her husband. He was doing it because of who she was and, just looking out for her. And that's what you need. You need a man who is genuine, who has a heart for God, and who is willing to do things for you without any expectation. When a guy puts expectations on his things, and it's not really true, it's not really coming from his heart. And fellas, you need to be aware of your motives and why are you doing this for this woman? Do you have any intentions for her? Along the line, down the line, and making sure that you aren't putting unholy expectations on her. Because if a woman is going to submit to you as a man, you have to be leading her in holiness and in righteousness, so that she can be blameless before the Lord. If you are sleeping with her and doing things with her that were made for the confines of marriage, then you are actually defiling her instead of making her right with God. And that's what your goal as a man should be, to make sure that your relationship with your wife is right, and that you don't do anything prior to you guys being married. And then we see later on where Boaz, after he gets the permission to marry her, he goes about it the right way. He marries her, and then they have a child. And that's really important. Also because you want a man who's going to make you a wife before he makes you a mother. And I know, these days that's like totally doesn't make sense to people. Most people, if they ever get married, it's they have a child and then get married. But the way it's supposed to work is that you are supposed to marry first and then have a child. I think another important thing that we need to look at is when Boaz found Ruth at his feet. He said, we're going to go and, make sure that your image is protected. He made sure that she was still saw as a noble character. He noticed that, everybody in the community respected her and know that she was a noble woman, or a virtuous woman. And he wanted to keep her holy and pure. Ladies, you want a man who is going to protect your image, who is going to make you be right in the sight of God. You know what I mean? You don't want a man who doesn't care about your image. And, a key in looking at that is, how does he present himself? If he doesn't present himself in the right image, how is he going to present you in the right image and make sure you are doing the right things? So that's like really important. And also, in submitting to your husband, I know like in this culture it's really hard to be submissive, but we have to learn that being submissive is basically saying, I trust the God in you to lead us and our family. And so, ladies, we have to look at the men that we're choosing. If the man we're choosing is not going to lead us into righteousness and holiness, then maybe he's not the one for us. And we have to really look at that. And no matter how much boo and baby make you feel and the things he says to you, if he's not leading you in the right way, then he's not the one for you, because eventually he'll not only be leading you, but he'll be raising your daughters and your sons. So it's really important to just look at all those things and, remain patient. That's why the title tonight is Don't Awaken Love Until the Time is Right. And then lastly, I just want to speak on, just being patient. A lot of us, we find ourselves in a really slow and, I guess, dry season where everything looks like it's going nowhere fast. Like if we go back and look at Ruth, like I said, she is from Moab. She's out of her own hometown. She's left the familiar to go to the unfamiliar or whatever. And she's lost her husband and everything. But, I think that God shows us here in this story how when you are obedient and submissive and humble, that, everything that you left and what was familiar to you. So your familiar might be, sleeping with boyfriends who aren't worthy of you and who don't deserve to be with you. If that's your normal or your familiar place, you need to leave that familiar place, because look what happened. When she left what was familiar to her, God blessed her. And, she was in like a slow season, I would call it, because she was just out in the fields gleaning, and even though she was in a slow season, God made sure that she was provided for and protected and well fed and everything. So, in our slow seasons, we have to be grateful for where we are. We have to be grateful for the slow season, because it's going to be a turnaround if we remain faithful to God and if we remain humble and submissive to God and His will for our lives. Say Naomi would have got frustrated with her situation, she would have never received the blessings that came to her. Like, she lost her husband, but in the new land, she gained a husband and a son. And for those of you who don't know, her son ended up being the father of Jesse, who is the father of David. So now we see that she left the familiar and became a part of the royal family, who and eventually where Christ came from, the royal bloodline. So, don't be afraid to leave the familiar, fellas. Don't be afraid to leave the parties and the clubs and just sleeping with random girls and whatever to make your ego feel good. When you submit yourself to God and to Christ and allow Him to do work in your life, that season will be really slow, and I'm witness to that. It gets really restless sometimes, but I encourage you not to let the restlessness push you back to what was familiar to you, because what was familiar to you will block your blessings, and you don't want to block what God has for you in the new place in your life, in the new land of your life. So I just encourage you all tonight to just, pray about whatever your familiar thing is, whether it be sleeping with a boyfriend or sleeping with a friend with benefits who doesn't have any real, future for you. He doesn't have any plan for you. He doesn't care about your image. He doesn't care about, where you guys are going or where you'll be in the next, few years. He's not trying to marry you. And, the worst thing could be is, you might wind up with a baby and then, you know, no ring or anything. You want a man like Boaz who is going to provide for you and protect for you without expectation, without wanting anything from you. And then being honorable enough to say, you know what, you have submitted yourself and you have shown yourself to be faithful and true. So you know what, I'm going to go about this the right way and do the right thing by you, and get permission from the one who really has rights to you. And in our case, the one who really has rights to us as women is God. Our heart should be so lost in God that we don't even realize that is a potential suitor in front of us until God shows it to him. So fellas, you need to be going before God and making sure that the relationship that you're seeking with us is okay with him, because we belong to him. And ladies, he shouldn't have the key to your heart until he gets it from God. Unless God gives him the permission. In the story, when Boaz goes and speaks with the cousin, when the cousin gives his rights over, and their tradition, they would swap sandals. So the cousin who had rights to the land, he took off his sandal and gave it to Boaz. And this is the same thing that you need to be seeking in a relationship now. If you're trying to marry a woman, you need to go before God and make sure God is giving you the permission, and make sure that God is going to bless your relationship and saying it's okay to take this relationship to the next level. And ladies, unless he has a heart for God and he's going to God before he comes to get you, and he's not just going after his own wants, then that's not the God that you want to be with. You need someone who's going to be able to cover you, who is going to be able to, make sure that you are always seen in the best light and always pushing you and keeping you pure and holy and acceptable. You don't want somebody who is willing to tarnish who you are. A man of God is going to lift you up and bring you closer to God. He's not going to use you for his own needs, and not make sure that you are where you need to be with God. And fellas, you want a woman who's not going to be tempting you to go and do things that aren't honorable. She didn't try, Ruth did not try to use sex to get or appease Boaz. She went to him and laid at his feet and was humble, and she was fully clothed. She didn't go with him and try to sell her sex to get more, to get him to marry her. So ladies, if you're with a guy and you're sleeping with him thinking that's going to make him marry you, that is not the case, and that is not how God intended it to be. And if you have to sleep with him to get a ring, then he's not the one for you, because a man of God is not going to want to be with you prior to marriage. So I just really encourage everybody tonight to just, look deep within. Ladies, if you're sleeping with a man in hopes of getting a ring, that is not what God has in plan for you. And I'm just going to close out by reading Jeremiah 29:10-12. This is what the Lord says: You will be in Babylon for 70 years, but then I will come and do for you all the good things that I have promised. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope in the future. Then you will call on me and come and pray to me, and I will listen to you. So for all of you who are in, that slow place or whatever, he said you will be in Babylon for 70 years. So while you're in this place, be patient and know that God is near. He said, because when he comes, he will fulfill every promise that he gave to you. All the things he promised you, they will come to you. You will pray and he will hear you. So don't stop praying. Keep seeking his face. And when we seek his face, all things will be added unto us. And he said that he will prosper you and give you hope for a future. So don't be weary in this place. And like the title of the blog says, don't awaken love until the time is right. When the time is right, God will lead you to the man or woman that he has for you. And until then, just be patient, focus on his work, and know that God is here and he knows the needs and wants that you have. He's placed them in us. He told us to be fruitful and multiply. Therefore, it's not that he will not have us to, he won't tell us to be fruitful and multiply and not give us the mate to do so. So just, keep that in mind and know that God is here and he knows what's going on, and this time won't last regardless of how long it seems you've been here. This time in your life won't last long, and as long as you're faithful over the little things, God will give you so much more.